welcome to the second lecture, and this time it's about the Islamic traditional crafts. And again, we do not like the term Islamic architecture or Islamic crafts, but the idea it is the architecture and the arts of the Muslim community, those who adopted the doctrines and the principles and code of thinking, and as well as the concepts and principles of designs of the inspired and the previous civilization that made the continuation and hold the torch of civilization to continue with the principles. Many of which, if we study it carefully, we would be exploring some BG3 to discover within our understanding and the profound exploration of each of the artifacts that we are going to discuss today. Take an example, and we will take a tour along samples and the best collection of Islamic art, and it is definitely in the Islamic Art Museum in Cairo. As you can see this plain kufic and the inscriptions from the early calligraphy or art of calligraphy from the 7th century. And in like few centuries after, we discovered that the art really elaborated and developed to take such a form with such a high quality illumination, gilding, and inscriptions with high ornamentation. Exactly what happened with the ornaments of stucco and wood carving, to see the evolution that really happened like 300-400 years after, 3 centuries, 4 centuries after, and to see the evolution of what is so called the art of the arabesque. And this is definitely a journey from the previous and from the inspired sources of ornamentation to reach to the classics of the epoch and the epoch of the climax of such art. Let me explain it thoroughly here. As most of the Abrahamic religions, so everything really started from the desert, from not necessarily nomadic, but the palm trees were something very common. The date palm and the frond of the palm and this kind of lovely leaves of the palm trees were always embedded in the religion as symbol for the Abrahamic religion. Like, for example, synagogues of the Jewish, especially from the Eastern Jewish, which is the Sephardim, we would find on the temple that they designed lots of palm trees design. Even in Christianity, the reception of Jesus Christ when his entrance to Jerusalem, we were waving with palm trees. I mean, the people of the Middle East and of course people of Jerusalem, and the reception of Muhammad, the Prophet, peace be upon him, been received in Le Medina or Yathrib when he made his immigration from Mecca to start his own Muslim state in that city. Also received by the palm trees. So palm trees is something very much embedded in such civilization or in such culture, and we will see definitely if we take the frond like this, half of it, this is the frond, half of it, or this is stylized, and then if we make it more and more stylized or abstracted, stylized meaning abstracted, to be very stylized like this, and out of such motif, everything started. Everything started like in the super decoration and ornamentation to take the front. This is the unit, and this is the unit when it is a bit more flexible, or when it is like being used in order to make this kind of array and intrication, and together with other motifs, of course, but the main concept was just one element, and out of the unity, which is symbolized by the one element, you have the diversity of the shapes by the geometrical arraying, by making stars of it, by making intrications, by making all of that. Why? The interpretation of that, up until that we took from this kind of ornamentation and this motif, something very simple, relatively simple, to something with this kind of huge and mass ornamentation and coverage of the surface like this. Oleg Grabar, which is one of the scholars of the Islamic art, said that in his book Formation of Islamic Art, the Harvard University Press in 1981, saying that It's multiplicity from unity. The multiplicity from unity. Unity is always symbolizing the unity or the oneness of God in the doctrines of Islam. And we symbolize that by taking one form out of the one, which is the one God. He created this kind of variations and alterations in order to create the whole universe with its magnificent diversity. And of course, there was also another concept, which is horror vacui in Latin, meaning that we do not like to have a plain surface, but in fact you just need to charge your surfaces with lots of ornamentation. Ornamentation itself was envisaged as a kind of energy and energizing your surface, whether the surface of in a wall, whether a surface of a niche for prayer, whether an artifact, etc. So we start with the different states or the different empires during the dynasties that ruled on behalf or carrying the message of Islam. So the first imperial power was in Damascus, seated in Damascus, and it was by the Umayyads, and they expanded to the west and to the west and to the east, to just capture the plateau of Iran and to go as far north to Spain, up to even the borders with France. And if we can see during that time, they already seized the power of the Sasanians, which is the Persian power or the Persian Empire. So they said, or they claimed, because many of the caliphs were married to princesses from their Persian origin or from the Persian royal family, of course, royal family. So what we saw here is something very much relevant to Fairuzabad, which is a kind of architecture inspired from the Persian culture. But within this is Qusayr Amra, which is a kind of like a rest place or a refuge place in the middle of the desert, in between what we know today as Amman and Damascus. So they used to have this as a kind of a nostalgia for those caliphs already established in Damascus, where lots of rivers and the greenery, etc. So they are recalling their ancestors of the nomadic origin, or more into the heart of the peninsula. But they got this kind of architecture within the heart of the Byzantine Empire, meaning that I am imposing my domination on you, that predominantly under the Byzantine architecture and art, by Sassanizing your land and express myself in the empire with the motifs of the empire. I can claim that I inherited, because they already seized the power in Persia. But the ornamentation and the decoration inside, even like that, unexpectedly with anthropomorphic motifs, anthropomorphic motifs, it's very much reminiscent of any church or any Byzantine art, because it's already ornamented in such a place with such motifs. Here we do not see something that we can say about this is Islamic, or it's something that is relevant to what we see in the Middle East or we used to see. Of course, this would evolve with the time. Again, art is like a baby, so it is taught and it just receives some inspiration. But as I always explain, it's like a honeybee, meaning that I just got it as a serum, as energetic power in everything. So it might be like a serum in a flower, but it is already consumed by the bee, by the honeybee, and then it would reinterpret it in a different format in order to create its own arts. So that's why in the Prophet says, in one of the Prophets say, Muhammad, peace be upon him, saying that I am just a building that is incomplete, and I was a location that was missing some kind of a brick, and I was just the brick to complete the grandiose and the magnificence of that building. Meaning that we are a continuation, we are always a continuation. Man, production, civilization and culture is always a torch that is always in flame, and we have to keep it like that, and to keep it for the goodness of mankind. Up until that we reach to, do we have this kind of figurine and do we have this kind of sculpturing in Islam? Yes, in early Islam, because the influences were very high from the Byzantine influence. We can see even here, it's quite interesting, an exotic example, because it is also part of the Umayyad Caliphate that was seated in Damascus, but they expanded in the whole Fertile Crescent region and the Eastern Mediterranean, So the statue might be influenced by this kind of sculpturing from the Byzantine period, but the eyes, we call it the Coptic bold eyes, because definitely this is stucco work, and the eyes, which is a very bold like this, is definitely from the Coptic art. But with this dense ornamentation and stylized line orthomorphic motifs, and with the trees and vegetations, is very much from the Byzantine influence. We can see also such a beautiful glass mosaic with gilding, etc. This is from the Byzantine influence, as we can see, and it is always a connotation of the heaven or the paradise, always in the ornamentation and the decoration, up until the maybe the last dynasty of the Bourbon in France, and that we see that all the ceilings with this kind of winged creatures, the connotation of heaven. So we always like to bring heaven on earth. So that's how we just have such a beautiful ornamentation in the Great Mosque of Damascus. And here I would like always to point on something, that by that time the media and the self-expression is definitely architecture and ornamentation. Like, for example, Caesar has been always sending his messengers for this kind of a growing empire to say that, okay, I might get a hope to regain it back. But when his ambassadors visited Damascus and saw the caliphs really erected something as huge and magnificent and well ornamented like this, they returned back saying that they captured the concepts and keys of civilization. Don't hope for getting back the Fertile Crescent from them. You cannot. They have the keys and the secrets of civilization. Now they are civilized enough, not as you think they are. It's exactly what I explained sometimes. Even when God himself wanted to just express some kind of, or cast this fascination on the Queen of Sheba, Solomon the king and the prophet, peace be upon him, also introduced this kind of magnificent flooring and the pavilion where he received the Queen of Sheba to be fascinated, thinking that she's walking on water. This is something in the Old Testament, and it's also mentioned in our holy book. And now we are continuing with the good examples, and it is for the advanced technology that those people as early as the 7th century knew. So this, as we can see, this is luster. This is luster, which is like a bright, shimmering, copper-like effect, and it's casted on glass or crystal. And we can see this kind of glass work as early as the 7th century AD. And we can see also this is splash glazing on pottery. This is what we call it the Fayoum, where also from the 7th, 8th, early examples, in fact. And toward the end of the empire, of that empire, which is the Umayyad Caliphate, we can see this casted bronze of the animal of the cook, which is the spout of the ewer, which we know it as the Marwan ewer, and it was in the collection of the last emperor of the Umayyads. He took refuge from the Abbasids, those people coming from Khorasan, which is Afghanistan, and the Persian, against him as a kind of a replacing another dynasty, which is the Abbasid, to replace this kingdom or those people in the 8th century. But that was in his possession and was discovered and kept, of course, in Egypt. Then we got people coming from Khorasan, which is the area of the Persian plateau, invading this part, and they seized the power and the empire of the Umayyads, claiming that they are the descendants of the Prophet, and then having Egypt and North Africa up until the borders of Tunisia. That was under the Andalusian, which is the Murabitin, and those people who were more tribes from North Africa. So those Abbasids really came on the shoulders of people from the Persian plateau, etc. So they are, in fact, highly influenced by the previous culture or the previous civilization. The Sasanian is the best, of course, and it was like a huge menu of the arts of different types of composition, carving, etc., as we will discover together. This is silver inlay on copper and repoussé technique, meaning that we are hammering and taking the shape of the metal, shaping it according to the figurine that we want to show. It's a knight, a prince actually, or riding a camel in a hunting trip. And that's, we call it the hunting cycle repertoire of this beautiful production. This is Sasanian, of course, and this, we call it this way of holding the arrow, and the bow is the Parasian, like they call it the Parasian shot, which is actually the dynasty that ruled the plateau or the Iranian Empire before the Sasanian. So we're talking about up until the 7th century before they are completely defeated by the Muslims. This is another work of their stylized epoques, and they are confronting each other. This rams, and it's a stucco work of the winged figures and with beads, like a pearl beads. And here is another not a regular zoomorphic motif, but actually it's a legendary creature with wings, etc. And these are the two winged and with pomegranate-like features. This is another zoomorphic motifs like the one that we find with the Achaemenid civilization before the Persian, which is the time of the 5th century BC. All of this really offered this kind of legendary repertoire for the Muslims to, after they captured such an empire, to be charged completely with that, and then they took that to reproduce their own arts. According to the doctrines, they might be avoiding the zoomorphic and anthropomorphic motifs for the religious places, etc., but it was really a kind of a chance for them to enrich their own habitual places, joyful places, with this kind of repertoire. We can see this work also for its ornamental surfaces. This is stucco panels applied to the walls, to the soffits and the spandrels of arches, and we can see also this wood carving. And again, I would remind you with this kind of half palmette, but here with a beveled style carving, and it is very much augmented and exaggerated, as we can see here. Calligraphy still in the Gothic. This is from the Samanids. The Samanids were from like Afghanistan up to northern India, and we can see this kind of white lead glaze, and this is overglazed with this kind of slip painting, and then we glaze it again with this kind of Gothic elegant inscription. It's elongated a bit for decorative reason inscriptions. More and more stylized half palmette, but we can see that it is elaborating with time. And here is this kind of the fabric or the textile beauty of the textile during that time. So instead of the zoomorphic and anthropomorphic motifs, we started to have this calligraphy, and we can see the ivory inlay on wood of different types, like ebony, ivory, and mahogany, and all of them, in order to just make this kind of pseudo polychromic effect. Carving of the ivory, as we can see here, and here this is what we are calling the end of the Abbasid period, or the end of the Abbasid period, especially in Egypt, because after that, people coming from Mahdia, which is in Tunisia today, and they invaded the whole area, expanding to reach to Sicily even, and took the holy and the noble sanctuaries in Mecca and Medina, and to control great part of the Eastern Mediterranean, and reaching to the borders of the ocean, which is Morocco today. And we can see that they are using bluntly the anthropomorphic motif. This is taken from the bath, and the bath to them, it's like the social club. It's with intermingling together and chit chat and all of these things, like a social club, rather than just a utilitarian space. So it was something very important. So that's why you might be entertained there, it's served, etc. So you can have this kind of a squinches that is making a transitional zone for the square place to be covered with a dome. So these places, even this such as squinches, were decorated. Remember the horror vacuum, meaning that I don't leave a surface without giving it a touch, because I'm charging it with energy in its overall format. So I'm enriching the eyes, I'm enriching your imagination for those who are make a utilization of this place. We can see on the ivory panel here some musicians. We can see such a kind of refined work of this calligraphy and in threads of the silk fabric on the linen, which is very famous as the Egyptian Coptic gowns. And here it is during that rich period, and it was very expensive. very prestigious type of gowns. We can see here also the glass or the crystal with the shimmering effect of the luster surfaces, and that was by reducing the monodioxide of certain metals to be applied with the certain shapes in order to leave the effect of the shimmering effect of the design here. We can see also the wooden insuri, which is this kind of filling parts of the shutters with the kind of intricated half palmette, but here it's becoming more and more very much elaborated if compared to the previous. Here we are talking about, well, they started their own kingdom here in Egypt, or empire here in Egypt, seated in Cairo, and establishing the city of Cairo as early as 969. And then with time, by they started in the 10th century AD, and then they continued to the 11th century AD. See how elaborating how they elaborated the beauty of the half palmette, how they are intricated together. Islam something like very much reminiscent of the Celtic, if you can recall the Celtic arts, because really there is something quite interesting to learn that, well, again, as I said, we are receiving from the arts of those who preceded us, and then we are taking it to elaborate it and to develop it further. According to some research of Professor Ian Kemple, Edinburgh College of Art, and he told me once that, believe it or not, but there was a monk, a Copt monk, by the advent of Islam, he started to move, and then he moved to the west up until he reached to Ireland, where he gave the Coptic sources and influences to the Irish, and then that's how we started to see the Celtic art, which is this intricated things, and then it developed later in order to give the very characteristic René Mackintosh style intrication of this kind of ornamentation. So everything is connected to another, and if we just follow the historical thread, we'll discover together how we are very much intricated together. We produce some beauty because this beauty is according to some hidden secrets of composition. The syntax of the vocabulary that we use is definitely, if we're making it as if we are adding the do beside C beside me in order to give us the harmony of the song, something like this, and this is guaranteed when we do a certain syntax. It's because they are all human beings. We are all working together in the civilization like this. We can see the elaboration more and more in developing with time, up until we reach to this kind of more geometrical patterns, more intrications. And again, I would like to remind you with the BG3 and the positive energies that we can easily generate and we can see here. And that's why when we learn more about such arts and how they are making it, and the artisans, not those who've been filtered culturally like in applied art faculties, but the artisans who are receiving the arts and the skill passed to them and generation through another and after another. We can see more and more of this beauty and the elaboration by the 11th century, and we can see these wooden beams from the Islamic Museum, and actually this is from the palaces or the main hall of the palace of the Fatimid Caliph, demolished of course, and only these parts remain from the archaeological excavations. And as we can see, it is more like a throne room or a festive hall, so we can see easily this kind of those who are entertained and drinking figures, and the morphic motifs and the hunting cycles for those who are hunting the lions, and this is a hawk carrier in order to hunt, and this is musician and player, and these birds together. And we can see how this intrication is happening, because when we intricating line together, this is very much adding more and more sophistication to the surface. And remember, the half palmette still here, but it is getting more and more super intricated, super stylized, and copied and made in mirroring and arraying, etc. It's like meditational when you look at surface like that. Believe it or not, but this also happened on marble and stones, etc. And imagine that in some cases that we have it in the interiors, as I explained in my first presentation, that these cascades of water drop onto a surface that is very much carved like this, so we are entertained twice with the sound, the rattling sound of the water, and the effect of the water reflected on such ornamentation, and the ornamentation shimmering under the water. Imagine what would happen to your senses. Those people were making arts for body, mind, and soul. And really they were successful in that, if we learn the actual secrets behind that. So again, with the art of the ivory, we can see such beauty. And remember, during the same time, okay, people also in Andalusia were producing the same, because we're talking about the 11th, 12th century. So such caskets, and we can see how this kind of ivory work, the rabbit was very important to them. Rabbit was always a sign of good luck for them. These are the water jar filters. So the water jar filter, we know according to the BG3 principles is that we are energizing the water once again, revitalize the water if we keep it in a container that is made of ceramics or pottery. But most important was this filter, because if any residues would be there, it would be definitely sifted through here. So we just have the water revitalized once again with such beauty of these filters. These filters actually varied, and they varied from a decade to another. So that's why they are blessing for the archaeologist, because in the stratigraphic analysis, when we are making the archaeological trenches, the numismatics, coins, etc., would tell us about the layers dating, but this can also be treated as the numismatic references. More of the pottery, because the pottery really flourished during the Fatimid Empire period. So we're talking about from the 10th to the 12th century. That was the time of the great pottery, and of course during Andalusia, which left its own impact on the Spanish and the Sicilian pottery and Portuguese. Until today, we find it of polychromic with yellow effect and with this kind of shimmering effect and with different designs with the tiles as well. And of course, all influenced Tunisia and North Africa after that, after the Reconquista. But we can see here some good example from, this good example I think is from Pinaki, which is the Pinaki collection in Greece. But these good and lovely examples are from the Islamic Museum. And again, it is white lead glaze, opaque, and then the drawing with monodioxide, and then you put it in the kiln, and the shimmering effect would be only left because you make a kind of reduction from the oxygen, and the only thing left is this kind of the beauty of the metal. And that's why until today, after almost 1,000 years, still shimmering. And we can see the different types of ornamentation, zoomorphic, vegetal, the stylized deer, and we can see also these elements from Eastern Mediterranean, Syrian, and it is this graffiato technique, which is by insisting on the clay, on the mud, and then I dip it into alkaline glaze, so that's why it is a translucent one, so I can see beyond, but definitely by after casting the color of the glaze, we can see the different shades of green, turquoise. That was very common during the time, and we call this Raqqa ware, after the city of Raqqa in Syria. And we can see also these good examples were made in Egypt and just exported to all the world. This reconstruction is from a broken rim that we discover in the excavations of the Fustat. I am the one who reconstructed this, but because of this kind of double folded piece of and the ranceau and all of these things, and this is scrolls, I just learned from the typology by studying and examining carefully the remaining piece of the rim, and with the different motifs available, and then I started to complete the whole work, but I just made a very good guess based on that design in order to make it here, and that's how I reconstructed the whole platter. Another, I would call it wing, which is the western wing of the Islamic diaspora or the Islamic world during that time was the Andalusian, and it is rich with its geometrical patterns, and we can see when we say interrogation, horror vacuum, that is the best example. Good example from Tenerife, Alhambra, and we are all familiar with that. Such jars, as we can see, as I said, which is super luster, and even after the Reconquista, we can see the alberello form. This is after the Reconquista because of this emblem, as we can see. So it is even after the advent of the non-Muslim rulers, but they were still using the same format. This is the alberello format, and even they are continuing with their designs and arts. Norman, as I explained in the first lecture, the Norman already in Sicily, they were already, the language of the throne or the court was Arabic, and they commissioned Arab scientists and artists, etc. This is the very well known and famous molded Alhambra vase, like amphore, and with this kind of dense designs with the lozenges and the motifs common during that time. This is the art we call it the zolage, which is the faience glass mosaic, the ceramic mosaic for the water fountains along the streets, with this kind of cushion voussoir of the arches, and how intricate it is, like radiating lozenges. And this is a tiles is very common in North Africa and definitely in Spain, because it is very remarkable with its yellowish character and geometrical and combined geometrical and vegetal patterns. And as the Fatimid, also their counterpart, but to the south is the Fatimid Empire. Those Andalusian really use this in Spain, and with this luster and with their very fine ornamentation. The jugs and the mugs are also using this kind of luster pottery, etc. Up we reach to this kind of huge intrication and this kind of like a dentelle, like a stucco work, which is gypsum, but and this kind of very dense ornamentation, very high Andalusian influence. Again, it's an open world with globalization, even with the scientists, even with the artists. So after the Reconquista, they started, Muslim and Jewish, started to move together to North Africa. That's why the religious minorities in North Africa, they were Jewish. But we had our own citizen people of Egypt. Many of them were Christians. So that's why the religious minority in Egypt is Christian, not Jewish, because of that. But of course, we received lots of Jewish coming after the Reconquista. And many scientists like Ibn Khaldun, the founder of the science of sociology, because we shared much in this Islamic diaspora or the Islamic world with the principles, the economic principles, the economic values of the dinar, which is the coins and the currency, and the language, which our Latin was Arabic. So we shared that, and this is the canonical language. We can see also some good examples of the kufik. Again, there were many types of kufik. That was the plain kufik, which is very plain, and you can see it in Ibn Tulun Mosque. We're talking about the we're talking about the 9th century, and then we're talking here about the more elongated kufik, and then we are making it more and more elaborated. And then we have the floriated kufik, which is a kufik, but instead of just being elongated, we make ronceaux, we make the circles, we make intricated surfaces in order to give dense background as a dentelle of surface, in order to enrich the calligraphy band, as we can see here, and as we can see here in this kind of sift or filtered window by the stucco, and with the calligraphy and the ornamentation of the half palmette that I mentioned before. To reach to such kind of dense surface and this elaboration of ornamentation, and this is like a qibla niche or a demarcation of the direction of the qibla, and it is existing in the old mosque of Ibn Tulun when they wanted to revitalize the mosque after being deserted for a while after the Abbasid conquest, and then replaced by the Fatimid. So that is one of the viziers, one of the ministers of the Fatimid Empire, and this is his contribution to that mosque. Another part is actually during the Seljuk period, because those Abbasid who were established in Baghdad and Samarra, which was like their little Versailles, their little version of Versailles, they became more and more weakened, and then they were dominated by another type of Muslims, but they are more nationalist Iranian, which is the Buyids, and they were more Rawafid or Shi'i, up until that we reach to the time of those Bukhara from Central Asia, people of the Central Asian closer to the Mongol origin, which is the Seljuks and the Uguz tribes or Oghuz tribes, and they started to invade, and they released the Abbasid Caliph, which was to them or to the Muslim world during the time as a kind of like the Pope of the Sunni world. and they took the Eastern Mediterranean, and they started to infuse to just occupy Eastern Anatolia, and they started to battle against the Byzantine Empire, or what remained from the Byzantine Empire. We can see the double-headed eagle, and we can see the type of carving, stone carving that they used to have here as early as 12th century, and we can see this kind of ornamentation, and many of them really were carrying some influences coming from China as in their pottery, and as I said, they are sharing much with the race of the Mongol race. They are a stuff and from a closer race to them. We can see even the quality of the molded pottery, and even with this kind of thefts. Of course, this is application or applied forms over the form of the jar, and it is pierced in order to give this kind of pierce effect, and with alkaline glaze. This we call it the Minai face or the Iton. Iton is the full moon face because their features were like rounded shape like this as a point of static, and the sign of beauty is like fat ladies and with complete rounded face with this kind of Far Eastern eyes. They shared such features, so that's why you can see that reflected with the half palmette and the ronceau here, and we can see this kind of polychromic decoration. As I said, it's white lead opaque glaze, and then overglazed by the paintings on depicting them anthropomorphic shapes for human with the Iton face. We call it the Iton face, meaning that the full moon face, which is a sign of beauty, which is more rounded faces like the Far Eastern features, because they shared much with that. And we can see this is like a stelo, which is like a band demarcating the panels on the wall, and then this is the termination of that panel to the painting, to the regular painting or other surface of the rest of the wall. And as we can see here, it is with the 3D effect of like a knight over a camel, and we can see it polychromic, and it is overglazed actually, because this is again opaque glazing, and then they started to apply the type of the ornamentation and the glazing and gilding. Actually, this is complete gilding with gold leaves, and then glazed in order to give the impact or beauty of this. Remember, I always explain that in the art of pottery, we had always big challenges in colors. So in the technology during the time, it was really hard to get the deep red. It's very expensive, or the cobalt blue or blue in general, because it was very expensive to get. In fact, for such kind of blue, this is a kind of pottery that is very much in Persia, and again, it's the color is obtained by squashing the lapis lazuli, semi-precious stone, in order to get the powder to give the color that we hope for the cobalt blue or for this kind of blue, and then we apply the gilding for the shapes that we have here, and then we glaze it in order to close the piece of pottery for utilization. And this is for magical purposes and remedy purpose, because we can see the zodiac in here, as we might see also here a connotation of the fish is a connotation of the baraka, which is a synergy and blessing, etc. Then we will see, of course, the beauty and the art of the Ayyubid period. Pottery in itself is, and the ceramics and the art of ceramics is losing its throne by the replacement of the Fatimids by the Ayyubids, who were the descendants of Saladin. And during that time, Saladin was with his uncle and family. They were from Kurdish origin, and they were serving the Seljuks and the Seljuks emir in Eastern Mediterranean, which is in Syria today. And we could see that they, instead of the pottery, still pottery in vases in some surfaces, but not as with the luster, not with this kind of elaboration pottery that we saw it a couple of 100 years ago before. We can see this kind of black slip painting and this kind of alkaline glazing in order to just to give this kind of lovely format, or this white glaze, white lead glaze, and with over glaze decoration, enamel over the glass in order to give these flasks and even the mishka, which is lamps. But the bronze introduced itself even more and more. It was already in its fantastic days format with the silver inlay on the bronze in Iraq. inherited from Iran, Persian and Sasanian before. And we could see this candelabra. And we also see the continuation of the development of the wooden panel with a geometrical or geometrical with vegetal and the half palmette, together with lots of scrolls, as if we are making a kind of meditation or like hypnotization by this dynasty ornamentation things. We could see also during the time the Mongol Empire and the Mongol, which is I would say this is the largest empire that happened in history, and we can see that they occupied the whole Mongolia, China, great part of the Far East, and they expanded to just invade everything. Even they swallowed Baghdad and they killed the Caliph, and the descendants of the Caliph really took refuge to Egypt up until they reached to northern Black Sea, and they were about to invade. Well, they invaded already some lands from Eastern Europe, up until they were defeated by the Egyptians, and that was their end or the termination of their presence. Otherwise, they could have just swallowed the whole world. They converted into Islam, actually, and we could see that those who really were against them were the Mamluks, which who are janissaries or like special forces who ruled, and they protected the descendants of Saladin, the Ayyubids, but then they replaced them already by the death of their the last king of their bloodline, and they became the generals who are ruling Egypt, in fact. And we can classify them into two dynasties. The first dynasty, which is, we call it the Bahari, or the Qalawun dynasty, from the 1280s up until 1380s, and then the last one, which is from the Farquq one, which is from the 1380s up until the 1517, when the Ottoman invaded Egypt. And we can see that those Mongols converted into Islam to control these lands of the Central Asia, Samarkand, Kazakhstan, and they had their seat of power in Tabriz in northern Persia, closer to the Caspian Sea, and they were already here around Baghdad, and they were always in competition with the Mamluks. Even both are Muslims, but they were competing with them. Seljuks were here, and they were doing their business with the Byzantine Empire up until that they captured them, and here they established, or that was the cradle of the presence of the Ottomans, the last dynasty that ruled, claiming the descendants, being the descendants from the Prophet's bloodline. And we can see those Mongols who converted into Islam, they continued with the traditions, but with something quite interesting. As we can see from their own Tabriz, they had their own pottery. They brought with the Persian that they controlled this albarello shapes with this squash lapis lazuli, and they're applying the gilding, etc. This is another type of the type of pottery that, when we have the gilding in Persia, when we have this gilding over the lead glaze, opaque lead glaze, from the either white background or cobalt background, we call this Lajvardina technique. And here we have the Sultaniya, which is the city of Sultaniya, which is or the Sulaymani, which is closer to Tabriz, where they have this kind of influences from the blue and white. They were carrying the influences of the pottery and ceramics of the Chinese art, and definitely that was very inspiring to them. This is why we see on their palaces the dragon and the phoenix and this kind of very Chinese influences, and we can see that they use this kind of 3D beveling effects with this kind of ornamentation, that we can never mistake the similarity between this and between what we can find of the motifs of the peony flowers and this kind of ornamentation of the platters of the blue and white Tang dynasty. And we can see the elongated bold naskhi, we call it bold naskhi, and at the background like the foliated ornamentations that we used to have with the luster effect and the cobalt blue. This one is molded and with alkaline glaze that they could see up until Raqqa. We see them also up until that they have the descendants and their descendants, which is up until until the 14th century that we see this kind of tiles and the ceramic and the advancement of the beauty of that. Still we can see this, especially in the mosques and shrines that are still existing until today in Iraq and Persia. They had their influences, but of course nothing as beautiful and would manifest such kind of excellence of such art as Samarkand, the Rajasthan, and the high drum domes, elongated drum with a high neck for the dome to give room for bands of calligraphy, and this kind of highly balanced solus calligraphy with such a kind of complete balance in the composition and form, and this ranceau and the embedded half palmette in the polychromic tiles, something very poetic for the eye, extremely elegant in its form. And this is the Timur Lenk and his dynasty, and Olcay too. And the influence is still there and continuing. Again, they're never forgotten that they are the descendants of Genghis Khan, who is ruling in the Grand Khakan, which is the Grand Emperor, who is based in Beijing and ruling from China. So this kind of double candelabra with a double-headed eagle, or sorry, a double-headed dragon, or intricating or twisting two dragons in the candelabra, with the chi-like motifs common in the Chinese art, but this is a Tabriz styled rug, and we can see also the chi here. In the chi is like a cloud, the Chinese cloud, and how it is existing in the tiled surfaces of the designs of that period. We can see the same repertoire of designs and patterns in this manuscript from the classics of the peak of the art of the book in the Behzad style from the 15th century, Timurid or the Timurid or the post-Timurid period from his dynasty, and we can see the beauty on and that was the dawn or the cradle of the Safavid and the Safavid empire, and that was the best of the best in the art of the book of the Islamic arts, or what is so called the Islamic art. Again, I said that the art of the Muslims, and we can see the pastel shades and the jewelry-like colors for even stones and landscape, as if it is like stones from the heaven, and the connotation embedded in the forms. When we go back to Egypt, also from the 14th century, we can see this is the shrine of Sultan Hassan, and we can see that this from the 1350s. This is the Barquq in Mu'izz Street, and it is the founder. He's the founder of the second dynasty of those janissaries or generals who ruling Egypt from the 13th century to the 16th century. And we can see the ceiling of the main prayer hall, which is like the art of the book during that time. The leather of the art of the book with and giving the pattern, and then gilding happened, and then the color and ornamentation, maybe for a dyed piece of leather taking the dark blue color, and it is exactly what we can see on the ceilings here. And we can see that they excelled much, nothing about the pottery no more. The utensils and the jewelry sets of any bride would be definitely more practical and durable if it is from metal, copper, a tradition that continued with the Egyptians up until mid 20th century. But of course, it won't be only just like that. It would be with variations of the metalwork and this kind of not only ornamentation and this kind of carving on the repoussé and this kind of intensive calligraphy, but even with inlaying two types of two types of metal, silver on bronze, or red copper on yellow copper, or on brass, something like that, would definitely be very much intriguing for the eyes and carrying source of inspiration. Remember that we stopped, as I mentioned earlier, we stopped those Mongol coming, but they were people moving with, like nomadic tribes, moving with their own carried palaces, which is their tents. So they were masters in patchwork. So this patchwork, we call it khayyamiyya, actually was introduced to Egypt by those people, by the Mongols. So we defeated them. We are not going to kill them all. And of course, many of them we captured as prisoners. They were Egyptianized and they were integrated with our society as Egypt all the centuries, all the time. If we just study this kind of the genealogy of those people here around us in Cairo, we will discover that we are like in a United Nation, a living United Nation. So they carrying and they just injected the beauty of their arts, and then we took the art and the techniques and started to apply it with our motifs. The one that we used to apply it on the patterns of the marble, etc. And we take the same motif, but we make it on patchwork to give us this kind of like beauty of the traditional Egyptian patchwork. Some excelled and even creating some kind of cloth of more pharaonic in its format, etc. This beauty is not patchwork, but in fact it's carved on marble and polychromic surface, because it's just the front of the visitor of the vestibule, or those who are entering the vestibule of Sultan Hassan Mosque. The beauty of the Islamic architecture and the top example of such typology, because normally in Tabriz and big countries of the Islamic world during the 14th century, they have a wall hanged on the wall to decorate the surfaces, but of course not enough for Egyptians, because we know that the textile would fray with time. So we wanted to have the beauty, but eternal, immortal. So we just do it as we always do. We because we like to carve things, because we always think, until today, if you ask a housewife what would you like to make the floor, she would say granite, so I won't have to replace it. I don't want to have to change it. I might not live for more than 20 years, but I know that this floor will survive for 3 or 4 generations to come. It's embedded in our DNA. And as we can see here, this cup-like design, it's because the emir or this man who this piece or cloth or wall hang, etc., was designed for him, is because his rank, because he's a cupbearer for his sultan. So he's the one entrusted for the drinks of his sultan. So imagine how close he was to the sultan. It's part of the recognition of your rank, even reflected on the art and reflected on utensils that you are having in your possession. Such beauty, which is cupboards within the walls of your hall, etc. It is a kind of inlay of ivory, ebony, and together with a solid wood, and we can see the beauty of this stationery. It is from the late Mamluk period. We're talking about the early 16th century. We can see the mother of shell inlay and this beauty of the surfaces. Still the pottery, but as you can see, it's not as elaborated as the one that you used to see it in the previous dynasties. And of course, the art of enamel, and it is of course a very advanced type of enameling on the glass for the wall, for the ceiling lamps and oil lamps, in fact, but it is made of glass, and then the enameling is happening with the ornamentations that we used to see sometimes in the blue and white tang, or on the surface, or the half palmette things and the vegetal motifs, and the ornamentation sometimes with calligraphy in cartouches, etc. So that was there, and then they burn it, so they had to master the technique because it's extremely difficult to have it. As I said, with the Mongol advent, and they seized Baghdad and many countries, so those people already in Baghdad, they fled, they influxed to Egypt. They came carrying the revitalizing the art that disappeared from the pharaonic time, which is the art of metal inlay, which is, this is gold inlay on metal sword. So this beauty is in the Islamic Museum in Cairo, and it is fabricated in Cairo. And we had such kind of beautiful art by the 1250 with the advent of the Mongol attacking Baghdad. So the skillful craftsmen from Mosul, from many other parts of Iraq, they took refuge to Egypt, and they started to teach people the Khoje. Khoje is the instructor or the teacher in Persian, and that was like, you are Khoje, meaning that you are my master and I am obedient to you, as part of the craft, as part of like, because those people who are conveying the skill, they were like your spiritual mentor again. It's like a relationship between the apprentice and the Khoje is like the relationship between a father and son. Also during the Mamluk period, Egypt was not less than Iran in producing rugs. This is what we call the Mamluk rugs, only very few examples still existing. One complete one, you can find it in the Metropolitan Museum, and the other one is in the private collection of Sheikh Hussa Sabah of Kuwait, and it is geometrical patterns. As we can see, we only have one like this one, which is without the bordeaux, without the border, but this complete one, we do not have even one in Egypt, unfortunately, and it is geometrical motifs and geometrical patterns. Some art historian attributing that to the nature of those kind of generals, the Mamluks, from the 13th century up until the 16th century, because of this kind of disciplinated nature and this camps, military camps, etc. So they definitely would be going for more organized, more coherent geometrical patterns, as we can see it. And they used lots of tinges of colors and some variations in the materials like silk with cotton base, etc. So give kind of twilling or shimmering sometimes in the effect of the rug. We can see also the door shutters and the insulae and the kind of intricated and the patterns of this kind of, we call it the Arab carpentry or the traditional carpentry. They are using no nails, but in fact it is a kind of integrated one, and it is collected and assembled together, so it would just shrink and expand according to the discrepancy of the temperature in different seasons. We can see also and appreciate together this kind of panels for the panels and the dado for the holes and the ornamentation of this kind of friezes terminating these panels, and is in the prayer niche, sometimes in the domestic architecture. See the quality of what we call it the intarsia technique. Intarsia technique, which is mother of shell inlay together with pieces of small marbles. They are collected together, they are applying it all together in order to give this kind of geometrical patterns, this kind of eye-catching format. And in itself, it's like the mandala. When we just focus on that, imagine a surface, a complete place or interior that is really showcasing the beauty of the geometrical patterns, and with the quality fabric, what kind of, and with the kind of the filtered light that is penetrating the hole by the polychromic windows, by the stucco and colored glass, etc. And definitely this would add to the dazzling effect here. Some later during the Ottoman period would add this kind of tiles or the ceramic tiles or the qishani, which is again white lead with overglaze of bluish and different tinges of blue, and even this lionette, which is the part between the lantern of above the door or the opening and the constructional arch. And so in between they used to have such kind of motifs. We are talking here about the last king or the last dynasty, Al-Izz al-Mawlana Sultan, mean glory and wealth to our Sultan. And we can see the beauty of the tiles manufactured in Egypt. Even during the time we excelled in that. And then we been invaded by the Ottomans. The Ottomans already established themselves. They seized the Byzantine Empire by the time of the 1517 when they decided to come to Egypt. But we can see that the problem or the dilemma, the technological dilemma of having the heavy, the red is already resolved by the Ottomans. It's what we call it the Iznik tile. It's in the city of Iznik, when by the 14th century and the 15th century they started to resolve the problem. So we started to see some pottery and some beautiful ceramics, some porcelain that is white lead, of course, and then they are applying overglaze motifs with the peony flowers and the tulip. The tulip was actually limited to the Ottoman Empire. The seeds was stolen by the ambassador to Suleiman the Magnificent, the ambassador of Dutchland, Netherlands, who were visiting the Suleiman the Magnificent, and he managed to smuggle the seeds of the tulip. So it became later the symbol of the Netherlands, but actually it was limited, monopolized by the Turkish. So the tulip, actually its native land is in here, and they used it a lot in their motifs centuries before the Netherlands really took it as their own symbol. And we can see this kind of thick tomato paste like red, and the beauty of the designs of the Ottoman tiles, and we can see this vase also with this kind of like elongated leaves, acanthus leaves with the flowers and with this motifs, and the half palmette but depicted in a more elaborated forms with more vegetal, like making it to forget completely that it was frond of a palm tree and to be more vegetal, like half leaf of a tree or a flower or something like this. We could see how they are taking us to a different dimensions of the ornamentation. Not be misled. This is Turkish. This is not the royal Danish. In fact, this is called the, which is blue and white, and definitely the main source is of inspiration is definitely the blue and white tank, and we can see the white lead glaze and the porcelain and this mug and the flowers here and the peony flowers and this kind of stylized flowers with ronceau, which is the circles, and all of such motifs. They are called the Toghra ware. And then the Danish took this. There were no royalty during that time. So the Danish took this and they claimed that this is their characteristic or identified as Danish, royal Danish porcelain. In fact, it was Ottoman Muslim. We can see in the art of textile, we can see, of course, we know that the Persian art is fantastic with their own rugs, etc. up until today. And we can see the silk velvet, which is a gown. This is like stretched gown, and this is the shoulder where we have the sleeves, and then there is another gown. So this back part and the front part is connected like this, is to demarcate the sultan or some top-ranked figure. And we can see this stylized tulip flower and the peony flower here, and this is a prayer niche for a rug. Similar to that is a very famous Giord. If we find someone that is already suffering, which is lots of fraying, etc., it was many thousands of dollars today. We can see some examples from the Persian and the Indian Islamic or during the Islamic period, or when it was ruled by Muslims. This shield is actually from Egypt, and it is with gold inlay and silver inlay on this kind of protruded parts or insules, and with this kind of zoomorphic motifs with two bull together, and it was for the sultan, the shield for the sultan. This is Persian with this kind of ivory inlay and this kind of zoomorphic motif inlay, and this is more elongated calligraphy. We call it then more diwani. This is not nastalik, which is more elongated diwani, but with lots of arcade effect in order to give this the surface, to show the surface that it would be applied to for the shutters or for the openings, etc. This like a brocade, which is hand woven on a loom. It's predating the Gobelin and Opusson, made of silk. It is Indian, in fact, from the 17th century. Manuscripts also excelled on the cotton paper in the Mongol, which is the Muslims who ruled in India. And in India and Persia, we have this kind of the art of batik, which is the kind of the mold, and then applying it to the ink, and then applying that to the cotton fabric in order to make this kind of batik or impress, receiving the impressed or polychromic effect of printing, or the manual printing on the fabric. We could see it on curtains, we could see it on table cloths, etc. It continued and to find its way because of those Indian carrying the technique to South Africa or to the colonies of the British in the Anglophonic part of Africa. So that's why we find today some Africans with the batik art, because of this kind of cross-cultural relation. And we can see this kind of carving and the famous inlaying of different types of marble on the surfaces, like what we find in Taj Mahal, etc. And we can see these jewelry boxes by the ivory and a piece of different wood veneers together. Each part of the Muslim world, like the Syrian got their own character and flavor. The Indian got their own character and flavor. Asfahan, Egyptian, all of them, they got their own flavor. In Jerusalem, the Palestinian, they use with the more wide piece of mother of shells when in their inlay. Now continuing with more into India, so we call this technique as a pietra dorata. Pietra dorata is the stone of gold, but actually it's a kind of recognition of the inlaying of the semi-precious stones and precious stones on the marble surfaces. It's very well known in the Mughal art, which is the Muslim or the Mongols converted to Islam and ruled in India, like what we find in Taj Mahal, etc. So you believe that the different shades of the vegetal motifs is really expressed by the two tones or two different shades, for example, from the malachite. So dark part, and then the one that is twisted like this, more exposed to the shade and shadow, is reflected by the very skillful worker in order to express this kind of composition or the 3D effect of the two-dimensional surface in order to give more livability for the vegetal or the floral motifs that they are depicting. The jewelry of the Indian until today, they are actually inspired from that period. As we can see, the dagger here with the jade handle and this kind of diamond with rubies, etc. Until today, the character, the very distinctive character of the Indian jewelry is really coming from the Mughal art and the Mughal character of a style. Now we are approaching from the 19th century, and we could see this. This is like very much reminiscent. This is Ottoman, of course, and it is using the repoussé technique, which is molding, hammering, and then it's all silver, but we can see this kind of a 3D depiction. This is very much European to me. So it's a kind of, by the 19th century, we started to see the complete influences is there. I can't but recalling Nina Ricci symbol, which is two doves, or the dove in its naturalistic format. We can see also such beautiful jewelry, makeup mirror and tools, and it is from the Mughal India. And we can see the depiction and the character and the composition is very much European influence. And this is Qajar, which is more the dynasty that replaces the Safavid, and they were ruling in Tabriz, and they were also from that part. So that is when we started to witness the cultural rupture, more domination of the European and the European influence. The why question is, why do we study and revitalize back the things? Because we are witnessing, as I just said, the kind of rupture in the culture. While we used to have up until the first half of the 19th century traditional lifestyle that started to recede by from the 1800 to 1900 up until the total Europeanization that we witness. So we are witnessing a kind of internal, what we call it, the self regarding from an Orientalist or by a European perspective. So as if I'm just lending my Oriental eye to some outsider and taking his own glass to look at myself. Look at me today. I decided to come in a traditional dress, and this is what they call it, the Alexandrian type of the traditional male gown, because it's part of the traditional crafts, which is this. And the Scottish people, for example, in their wedding ceremonies at any municipalities, the man is really proud, the groom is very proud of his kilt, which is a skirt, in order to show up with his complete elegance with the different format of his Scottish identity and handsome look. So why don't we have the same and start to give flavor? At least at the end of the day, if you're an outsider and you're visiting my country, you need to take the cultural experience fully fledged. You need to see that carefully, and I cannot do that unless I just give you this from the whole milieu of the whole phenomena, meaning that art visually, utilization of utensils and making and cooking, and so it's a gourmet heritage, it's a clothing heritage, it's everything together, and that should be utilized in the perfect format. So that's what we have, what we ended to have. So if we are symbolizing this as a traditional lifestyle, and this is deprived from that. So in fact, we used to have certain clear values with our products, with our housing, with everything that is respecting, complementing such values. And later, we started to have the values as latent, so it's becoming inside us. Like, for example, the value of respecting your privacy. If I am a male member, I'm an outsider visiting you into your place. I cannot easily be boldly moving in your place. I would request some kind of certain behavioral practices in order to find my way out after I finish the session of visiting you. This is because of it's religious. No, it is not just religious, because this is a kind of combination to give the phenomena that we call it our social entity, that is a cultural ecology, dogmatic factors, so it's a customary regional laws. If we understand this carefully, we would understand local communities, we would be able to mingle, we would be able to communicate, we would be able to respecting and learn and revitalize what is considered as good values, as it should be, because it is latent, it is inside us. If we respect that, we'll be definitely able to continue with more sustainable format. As for example, a statue like this, the question of the identity is addressed best in here. That is one of the Egyptian patriotic artists in the 1920s. He designed this as a kind of stood against those who are recalling Egypt as just a kind of a quarry or a mine for the past, saying that no, we are the son of today. So it doesn't mean that I'm respecting yesterday, that I just have to be fixed with that. I am using yesterday as this sphinx that I am resting on, and I do respect, but I am that person, that proud, erected in its stem peasant Egyptian female that is stood proudly leaning on the past and her past, which is that sphinx. It's exactly common when we understand this from Yuka Yukeletto, the head of training in the ECOMOS organization, when he mentioned in his book, The History of Conservation, saying that, I think it was published in 1998, saying that we take the past on board as long as it serves today's needs. And who on earth would deny that there is some needs for that? As being introduced by Professor Said Karim, and he explained why do we need to revitalize the manual work, and how we can revitalize that, and how we can give a kiss of life back to this kind of traditions that by themselves they are a revitalization of good values for the eyes to nourish your body, mind and soul. Take for example this interesting thing that is in a house or a farmer's house in Luxor in the Western Bank, just few meters away from the ancient temples. And believe it or not, in the pilgrimage as a tradition, when those people would decide to make their holy trip to Mecca, they return back, but it is part of the tradition to decorate and ornament your mud house, which is completely covered with lime wash, which is a white plain surface, so you can easily apply your drawings on to celebrate such an occasion proudly by adding some drawings celebrating the date of your trip that you made your pilgrimage, etc. So as late as 2006, this man is proudly expressing himself, but by doing what? By doing the depiction of a side imagery of the pharaonic archetype, but instead of an ancient Egyptian pharaonic figure, he made the ancient Egyptian pharaonic figure dressed in the ihram, which is the pilgrimage gown that is exposing one shoulder, another is not, is covered. So we can see the man cannot just play truant or escape from his own legacy and tradition. In fact, he's respecting it and he's continuing. This is a continuing cultural influence, and that's why it is a must to reflect that and to celebrate it. Like for example, that is the Beit el-Ministerli house. It's from the late Ottoman period, mid-19th century, and when those people were, the house was confiscated for the public utilization and turning it into a museum, so they decided to have another palace. The country, the state of Egypt decided to give them kind of a land to replace that, and the designer of the house is a man who respected their legacy. So even that the house is built in the mid-1940s, they decided to recall some of their old family tradition, at least to be reflected in the design of the walls and the ornamentation, etc. Like for example, this kind of architecture of the oasis, of the vernacular architecture and mud architecture, definitely they were really degrading with time, and they needed some kind of development. And of course, the second and the following generations, they were really educated in University of Asyut, like 300-400 kilometers away, so they couldn't really return to here, so the village is ending up like this. And instead of just going and to try to explain and to try to see how we can revitalize it, make a contemporary version of that, they started to build in this kind of out of context things, which is completely not ecological, etc. But while if they studied carefully the technology and technique and the craft, they would have devised something like this in India, for example, which is mud architecture, creating houses that is more ecologically viable, etc., by understanding and then complementing that and creating contemporary touch. The how question, how we can explain that, which was I was about to explain, is like, for example, this is a tally work, which is in threaded silver threads or silver-like threads and sometimes polychromic threads and of wires, etc., on the piece of cloth, which is a mesh of cloth. And this is our famous actress Yosra, and how she turned this kind of type of elegant fabric into haute couture, which is a soiree or the nightgown in a very elegant format, as we can see here. We know that Adele was a bit shoppy in the past, and she worked hard with herself, bravo. But however, before, in a concert, she wanted to show up with something before the audience, and something that would express some kind of haute couture maybe, or something which is very quality, but with a kind of a shape that won't show her kind of shoppy body. So the designer the stylist give her this kind of dress that is in fact nothing but siwi, which is a traditional tribal type of fabric and textile that is made in the western desert, in such tribe in western desert of Egypt. And as we can see, that is the prototype, and this is the origin. And we can see here applied as an applique for the chest part and for the back part on a crepe, black crepe, in order to cover or make a kind of hiding the more fat bodies or fat exposure, but just show this. Nobody mentioned that is the crafts of Egyptians. Moorish and their excellence in interior design, etc., is becoming more a fashionable style for lots of villas and houses, etc., with their own of richness in the polychromic, this kind of rich color palettes and the different formats that is mingling the West with the East, and as much as possible adding this kind of coloring crafts, the stucco and the gesso and the colored parts and the enthreaded hand, the enthreaded fabrics, etc. They are sold everywhere, and right now it's becoming for special designers to just take and purchase and add. But what if I want to make it more and more, and to give more kiss of life for such crafts, make it more contemporary? As we know that the retro style is back, so this is my, for example, depiction as a kind of a retro style, which is like 60s and 50s chairs, but this is with a kind of and intricated leather bands, maybe gilded, etc., and this kind of tray that we can apply mother of shell inlay on that, and this kind of a divano or a sofa, it's like a sofa bed, but with more and more patchwork designs of the traditional style. This is complete contemporaneity of the style, and that can be another alternative that would promise some kind of a line, another line, meaning that we can have the prototype production of the original forms, and then we can have the more contemporary touch, or we can have the semi-manual, which is making the bread and butter and just make a kind of an integrated business model. So everything is inspired and with a great flavor, clear flavor for that. And that's why we could see even this happen by, for example, the Italians as early as the 1900s. So they designed this beautiful palace in Alexandria, and as we can see, it's inspired from the Ginocopede. Ginocopede got the actual format of the castle that he designed as early as 1902 that was built in the 1920s. But Gino Coppedi, the Italian, he was recalling, as I would call him the Italian Ruskin, meaning that he's counting on the medieval arts and revitalizing his arts by making use of the traditional Italian crafts in order to be integrated in here. The government of Tunisia, 25% of your house, it got to expose some kind of traditional crafts, maybe in the entrance, maybe in the openings, maybe in the tiles that you use, or the calligraphic bands or whatever, in order to keep or make kind of preservation of character, and by municipal order, in order to guarantee that the city of Qayrawan would be just exposing its own character and attraction to tourists with a special flavor, to take a complete visual cultural experience. That's what I'm recalling. Like, for example, see the beauty of modern villa, but using Moorish style. We need to see this achieved, but on a wider scale, under a kind of a bigger umbrella that would take this. And believe it or not, imagine if this is injected with BG3 in the designs, it would be something that is in spreading this high-end quality with roots of long legacy and definitely qualitative energy together. Thank you very much for the time you've given me, and I hope to see you again, hopefully in the courses that we are going to prepare for you next fall and winter. Thank you.